Who's actually like logged in with a free account? Keep your hands up. Oh, we got some. And who has like a paid account or like a more advanced account? Got one. That's kind of the level I figured. For some people, this is a new thing. Very few people have gone into depth on this. So when we think of the internet, a lot of us think of the World Wide Web. But according to the data collected by John Matherly for Shodan, that's only a small fraction of the devices that actually make up the internet. Of over the 500 billion devices that are on the internet, only about 10% of those devices make up the World Wide Web. So my name is Blythe. I'm the lead organizer for DevOps Days Kansas City and our monthly meetup, DevOps Kansas City. I grew up in the Quad Cities, right across the river, so I'm super stoked to be back here, seeing family and friends and stuff, and I'm hopefully making a bunch of new friends, people I met at the conference. So I've been working in software for over 15 years. I started out as a developer, but I was always that person that dove into the operations type of tasks. I would stack up machines on my desk so that we could run the extra Citrix server. And then when Jenkins came along, I was the one that had like the Jenkins machines. And eventually we had VMs, and I was managing a whole bunch of VMs. And then when DevOps kind of came along, I jumped right into Chef. And then from there, what I do now is I actually build Kubernetes stacks using GitLab. I did one semester of college in Australia. I didn't go to class that much. I did surf every day I could for months. I wasn't really very good, though. To be good, you likely have to surf for years on end. But every day when I got done paddling out, for what amounted to like seconds up on the wave, after getting pummeled for like what seemed like forever, I was smiling like this. So notice I didn't call myself a surfer. Similarly, I don't claim to be a security expert. That would take years that I haven't yet put in. So I've only been working in security for about 1.5 years, 2 years or so. However, when I learn things in security or technology in general, I have a similar feeling as I did when I was surfing. That was many hours of just paddling out for those seconds of clarity and that contented feeling at the end of the day. So Shodan was created by the self-described internet cartographer, John Matherly. He conceived of the idea back in 2003, which is now 15 years ago, and he launched Shodan in 2009. So you can find him on Twitter with the account Achillian. The easiest way to get started with Shodan is just to go to shodan.io. What Shodan does is to index all the devices that are connected to the internet. So basically what we're working with is like Google for every device that's connected to the internet that's actually seeable on the internet. Who here is familiar with Nmap? So most of the room. Yeah, it's that badass tool that Trendy used in the hacking session in the Matrix Reloaded. She actually uses it correctly to hack the power grid to find a vulnerable SSH server. Then she uses the SSH1 CRC32 vulnerability back from 2003, an exploit. However, as cool as that may be, I would warn against using Nmap unless you know what you're actually doing. Directly from their website, when used properly, Nmap helps protect your network from invaders. But when used improperly, Nmap can, in rare cases, get you sued, fired, expelled, jailed, or banned from your ISP. So reduce your risk by reading this legal guide before launching Nmap. Damn. Shodan is not Nmap. When I first heard of Shodan, I have to admit that I was apprehensive about using it, considering what I've heard about Nmap, especially when casting such a wide net as to map out the entire internet. But to be clear, Shodan is not Nmap. Just like with books, somebody needs to organize that library of all of the information. So what Shodan does is it crawls the internet both continually and randomly from data centers that are dispersed out across the entire world. And the basic unit that you use inside of Shodan that is a banner that's returned from the device. That banner is mixed with metadata, and the metadata, the most common stuff that's on there is the host name, the operating system that's running, and the geolocation data. That's intermixed with your banner. So the banner on the top right may be familiar to some of you. When you're on the internet and you're going to an Apache server, you see that it's using Apache 1.1 and you get a 200 success code. You can see the date, the server, the content link, information like that. The one at the bottom right is actually an industrial control system. I believe this is actually a turbine. So this turbine is actually connected into the internet, and they're able to see that from Shodan. So that begs the question, what all is actually indexed? So if we start at the left, of course we have web servers, but as we discussed in the opening, that's only about 10% of the overall internet. There's also databases that we would expect if we're coming from like an internet security background. But there's also this thing that's new called IoT, or Internet of Things, which is like webcams or watches, and many other personal devices. So speaking of Internet of Things, have you heard of this one? You leave your dog in an internet-connected box outside of a business, and then you pick up your dog after you leave the business. And what happens if it loses connectivity to the internet or your phone app or the electricity? This is a stupid idea. There's also a drone on the market now that picks up dog poop throughout the city. No shit. And the final one that I'm going to talk about today is industrial control systems. This one was probably the most interesting to me that I learned while researching for this presentation. There's many pieces of complicated industrial machines that are out there. Before the internet, before we had like internet companies, we had like Linux or whatever, companies would pay these highly trained individuals to drive out to these pieces of machinery. And this was incredibly expensive because the technician, like you're paying like umpteen dollars per hour, you're driving them all the way out, and then they go and like, oh, well, we just have to turn that on and off again, right? And then they have to drive all the way back. Or they need to be scheduled to be in another city 300 miles away. So these companies, as soon as the internet was around, what they wanted to do was they wanted to connect to the internet as fast as possible. And they did this before we had operating systems like Linux, where we have like a big open source community plugging all the security holes. They just wrote their own operating systems for all these industrial control systems, which makes things incredibly specialized, and we don't have all the good white hat hackers in the world out there actually fixing all the vulnerabilities, finding the vulnerabilities, and talking about those vulnerabilities. So what actually ends up happening is we have all these proprietary systems, and what these are actually running are our water and our gas and our electricity and basically the grid in which all the important things that we use are connected to. So pretty important stuff. So if we scroll down a little bit on the front page of Shodan, there's a report for Heartbleed. And I actually want to go and play with that now. If I can find my mouse. So this is Shodan.io. Basically, it's a search engine, and I'm going to show you a few of the searches as we go, but I do want to ease into this. There's a sample report on Heartbleed here. Does anybody remember Heartbleed? Does anybody not remember Heartbleed? There's a vulnerability in 2014 where you could essentially get shell through the internet onto some of these bots. I was working in IT at the time. I was doing the DevOps thing, and we were patching all kinds of servers. And the way that we were testing is we were simply looking at the version of OpenSSL that was running on the server. What Shodan is doing is actually quite a bit more interesting. So this report was ran in 2016 on March 26, and there's 207,000 devices that are connected to the internet that are vulnerable. However, if we dig down into this and see the live report, which should be run on demand, I'm going to have a little bit of trouble. I may end up, okay, there it is, the top left, 111,000. So we went from 257,000 2 years ago down to 111,000, which is pretty awesome. as a security community, we're finding all these vulnerabilities and we're patching them. Another thing you can do with Shodan is you can drill down, and I can just see the ones that are in the United States. And it's going to bring back this, and then I'm actually going to drill down into the city of New York. So like I explained earlier, we've got the metadata, that's kind of the stuff over on the left-hand side, and these are going to help us like find the groups of things. And then each one of these cards here on the right-hand side are the ones that represent the actual devices. So I'm going to switch back to my presentation, talk a little bit more about what we're seeing here. So this is from the Shodan book, and so when we were doing the patching, all we were doing is making sure that we had the right version of OpenSSL installed. What Shodan is actually doing, and I'll read directly from the book, is note that the crawlers only grab a small overflow to confirm service is affected by Heartbleed, but it doesn't grab enough data to leak the private keys. Actually, what Shodan is doing is actually confirming with Behind Shadow Without that these devices are being able to be exploited. So when we were patching all the machines, we would, I can't remember if it was like the exact version, I think it was like 1.11.g. We needed to get to 1.11.h or whatever that had the fix for Heartbleed. The scary thing about Heartbleed is that was the one that got an icon, a picture, and it was the one that we all understood was the bad thing. Since then, I believe there's been about 12 to 14 more CVEs that have, inside of OpenSSL, that have problems that we should patch. So, like I said at the beginning, I'm from Kansas City. I ran these reports on my hometown, Kansas City, and in KC we had 145, and in Overland Park, which is just on the other side in Kansas, where Sprint's headquarters is, we had 195 vulnerabilities at the time I started doing this research. So let's go look at those live now. Instead of New York here, I'm going to put in Kansas City. Did I spell it right?
2 spaces before your
Right here. Right there. Okay, I'm going to pull this over so I can see it, or I'm going to change my displays. That's the awkward part about needing my notes for. Okay, I found it. So we'll just go with the Overland Park one. The number that I had when I started doing this research was 195. I actually know quite a few people because I run the DevOps community in Kansas City. So I started just reaching out to people at their companies and saying, listen, you have this many servers, I can run this report for you and I can give you the information. We should work through this. We got the number down to less than half of what it was when I started doing this research. So I did this, no security consulting fee or whatever, just because it was the right thing to do and because those are the people that I go out and have beers with and they're all awesome people, so I wanted their company to be better. The next killer feature is the maps. You only actually get this one with the paid version. Based on the time that I have today, we're not going to dig into this, but I can show you the maps later on. If you want to take a look, it's pretty cool. But I have a screenshot here, and I believe that this was when we were looking at the Shodan vulnerability across the entire United States, where the actual vulnerabilities lived at. So the query language looks similar to any other query language that you might be familiar with. If you're familiar with the advanced features of like Google, or if you use Solr or Elasticsearch, they're fairly technical in that like there are these name value pairs. It's not just like natural language processing where you just type in like the things that you want. You do have to put like server : GWS, like hostname : Google, and information like that. John Matherly seems to be fine with this being technical, and so do I. This is extremely accessible to everyone that's out there. But I think it's probably better if like people that know what they're doing are the ones that are using this information. So some of you may be aware of Krebs on Security. He was attacked in the fall of 2016. There was a distributed denial of service attack, or a DDoS attack, that was executed from many Internet of Things that had a default weak or hard-coded password. Krebs reported that the source code for this botnet actually has been released, and the problem is that there's likely just as many devices out there that are connected with weak passwords as the ones that were used at the time that were actually attacking him. So let's go look at Internet of Things devices. So inside Shodan, you can actually create a search, and you can save it, and you can tag it with words. So what the tag I'm looking at currently is IoT, or Internet of Things. Someone else has created these particular searches. One's actually Netflix. These are devices that were running Netflix at the time that Shodan was crawling across everything. Here we can see industrial control devices on the internet. And I think what I want to see here is something like Insteon home automation. So here's people that have like, the things to turn on their lights inside of their house connected directly to the internet, so that when you're using these smart home devices, like you probably should keep that inside of your network instead of allowing me to go out there and turn on your lights and turn off your lights, because I would think it was just funny. So more recently than the Krebs thing, in March of 2017, there was the Vault 7 WikiLeaks release. This detailed how the CIA performs electronic surveillance in cyber warfare. So in these documents, it was made ever more obvious that Telnet is on by default on Cisco switches to the tune of over 300 different models. So by sending like a malformed CMP or cluster management protocol, arbitrary code, it can be executed to get full control of the machine. Cisco's response was turn off Telnet. So let's take a look at that inside of Shodan. When I did this original search, I was just looking for, let's see, where we have the Cisco port of port 23, which is what you use for Telnet. And I was able to quickly find 30,000 devices that are out there. And this was at the time, probably about 5 or 6 months after that report came out. So that as a community, we basically have stuff that continues to be out there. So overall, if you do have Telnet on and you're connected to the internet, it's not just the Cisco devices. We should basically be shutting off Telnet and not running port 23. Across the world, there's 5.4 million devices, and I just updated this number yesterday. The first time I did this presentation, this unfortunately is actually getting worse because it was 3.6 million devices. So more devices are coming on the internet that have Telnet available. So in talks that I've seen, John Matherly explains that the original intent for Shodan was to do market research. And I think this is a really cool idea, and I wish that the companies would do this. They probably won't. It would be awesome if Cisco and HP were to use this data to actually figure out a way to connect back to their customers and say, listen, you have purchased one of our devices, and it has a known vulnerability, and this is the known vulnerability, and this is the article that we actually have that helps you fix this. I imagine for liability reasons that this won't happen. So I'm also curious all the time as a community, like how we could potentially do this. How we could use either crowdsourcing or big data to use the information that's in here to actually find the people that own these devices and reach out to them on a mass scale, just like I did with the Heartbleed type of thing. It's not something that I've fully executed on, but if any of you have the time or the effort, I think it would be an awesome thing, and I'd love to talk to you about that. Shodan also grabs an image from the device in the cases that actually warrant it. This could be a bad idea, but I think I'm just going to go ahead and YOLO click this, and we'll see what happens. So here we have people's webcams that are connected to the internet. You can easily go see the latest picture at the time of the last crawl from Shodan for these webcams. We're not seeing anything too racy yet, so I should probably consider that good, but I won't. Let's keep scrolling. Now, let's search for Windows. Unfortunately, I've given this talk before. The first couple times I gave this talk, I was able to search for Windows, and what I actually saw was pretty cool. It was webcams of people pointed at their windows and such. It no longer does that. I don't know if it's because of my talk, because it's actually out there on the internet a couple of times. But what I really want to search for was like Windows, which would be like remote desktop. And here we can see, potentially, I don't know if you're responsible for any remote desktops that are available on the internet. Very easy for someone to come in here and say, oh, okay, well that one's like 2012 R2. I think this one over here might be 2016. Let's look for that good old like...
Oh, 2003.
Oh, we got 2003?
Yeah.
Oh. Here's a nice 2003. I've got a map of where it's located in the world. I've got information about it, which ports it has exposed, and things of that nature. So I can very quickly understand a lot of things about that server that's connected to the internet.
So, a little clarification. You said Shodan wasn't nmap. I mean, but still doing port scanning. Is that right?
It does similar things to what Nmap does, right? And that's why I think a lot of people conflate it. If you're on the command line and you're running Nmap or whatever, that's actually like whoever's on the receiving side of the ports you're scanning could identify you, right? With this would be like the equivalent of like if you were trying to crawl the whole internet, like you wouldn't want to do that, right? Google does that for you. So this is like Google for the internet. So instead of you having to go out there and say, I really like this website, what all does it link to, those things, and then like create a page rank type of score, instead like you just go to Shodan and it has the information for you. But yes, very similar in the type of things that it displays.
It does it. It gathers in one spot. That's using a similar technique, so you don't have to do it.
Right, and it's also limited. It's not every single port. It doesn't scan like port like 1 to 32,000. It does know, it has like semantic meaning. It knows that port 25 is your email port. It knows that 22 is your SSH, and 23. Whereas like Nmap doesn't really know that. Like you know that, and you type in I don't know these ports or whatever. Let's move on.
So, port scanning, why would that get you into legal trouble if you didn't do anything to actually penetrate the system after your port scan?
Because CFA is a poorly written piece of crap law.
Yes, I would agree with that. You're not supposed to go on to other people's devices without permission. And depending on how they view what permission they've given you, if you end up on, I don't know, say like a government type of site, like you can get in trouble with laws that are written that say you shouldn't have been on here, so now you're a criminal.
And the courts have interpreted merely connecting to a system, establishing a handshake as access.
Yes.
So it depends on what side that the U.S. attorney is woken up on. Right?
So how do web crawlers get away with that then?
Because they're not port scanning. They're just
Looking for the port 80.
So as long as you do one port at a time, you're good?
No.
it's a good way to evade some ID
Well, that's
access.
pretty much what a web crawler does.
But
Yeah.
Right.
You can tell a web crawler not to.
So the big thing about port scanning, right, is you got to take it away from digital stuff. Let me give a different analogy. You live in an apartment. You've got a telescope, and instead of looking at the stars, you decide to aim your telescope through somebody else's window. Now, you did not go in their house. All you're doing is looking through their window. But now they know you are. Are you in trouble? Yes. That's why.
Okay, so limitation of the free version. No more than 5 pages deep on any of the searches. So when you start doing searches, you can't get your full amount. You can't do any maps, and I believe there is some API access, but it's fairly limited. So as an individual, you can get access for $59 a month. I know some people look for the Black Friday sale that's happened many of the last 3 years. There are some limitations to this, but you can do a lot of fun things with this particular license. Since I'm currently getting my master's degree in data science, I have the education license, which is why I get to see a lot of the cool features. For enterprise access, the small business and corporate access gets you quite a few more features. This is what I would probably recommend, like having your either the corporate or the small business have your company sign up for, and then I think that the users, I think they're pretty liberal with allowing like almost everybody in the company access to that needs it. Shodan's marketing material boasts that they're at 56 of the top Fortune 100 companies, and they're on over 1,000 universities. So I imagine the question that you're likely asking is my device on Shodan?
Is it on the internet?
Yeah, only if your device is directly connected to the internet. So possibly your router may show up depending on the settings of many levels of marketing and networking and how your ISP has things set up. But even then, depending on, I don't know, like how things are scanned, it's not a constant scan, it is a periodic scan. So the answer is likely no, unless you're connected directly into the internet. If you'd like to check to see if you're on Shodan, there's a website to do this. So I ran this on my computer. Surely this is a reputable company. I'm sure they're awesome people, but I personally decided not to do the deep scan and invite them into my personal network. I'm sure I invited them farther than I probably should have just by going to the website, but it's just for the sake of interest, I did the IoT scanner from BullGuard. There's also a browser plugin that allows you to check the public configuration of the site that you're currently connected to. So from the website for this conference, I can see that where the host machine is and the ports that are open on that host. And I saw a couple of ports there that I hadn't seen in a while. It was 2082 and 2086. So, you can do some Googling, like, what are those possible ports? Because when I hit them directly in the browser and started playing around and hacking, I couldn't really get to those. But I did an NS lookup and saw that where this was saying this was pointing to, the IP address was what Shodan was actually saying. And the site is actually being served out of Cloudflare. And those ports, I couldn't get those ports out of my mind. So I did find out that they're actually from cPanel, And it wasn't the actual ports that were shown on Shodan. It was actually one port over. So I was able to get to where the logon screen was for cPanel for this conference's website, and I didn't go any farther than that. We can talk about that later.
So is that a default installation of cPanel, probably?
It is. And is there a default password for that?
There it is.
Yes, there is.
All right. So finding out things that we can find out. Moving on. My favorite part of one of these talks, I highly recommend if you want to find out more, you go to John Matherly's talks on Shodan, because he's a much better speaker than me, and he knows the stuff because he created it and everything. So my favorite part of one of his talks is how he goes into how him and one of his partners like found an industrial control system, a really important thing like a power plant or something in Europe somewhere, and they phoned him up and said, "Hey, listen, we got this web console and it's HTTP, and I can click on buttons in here. I haven't clicked on any yet, but some of them say on off type of things or whatever. Like, we should do something about this. It sounds really important." And on the other side, they're like, "Oh no, that's completely secure. No one's going to find that, because we only use a static IP address, and we didn't put a domain name on it, and we didn't use DNS, so no one's going to be able to find that." So they, through that call, I think they had to explain to them a little bit of how the internet works and everything. But I think over some time they actually got it cleared up. You can pick up the Shodan book written by John Matherly for $5, or if you're like me, you can scroll the thing over and pay $10 because it's super awesome that he's created this thing and it's out there on the internet. And then I'm going to land this thing because we have the next talk. I did start a little bit late, so I apologize for that. But with my disclaimer, I've been incredibly tempted to click on stuff and go to these addresses that I find or whatever. But I want you to use this for positive purposes. And I want to make sure that I've told you that accessing or attempting to access someone else's device could be punishable by law. I tell you these things so that you can protect your own devices or your company's devices, not so you can do anything bad. If you do choose to do something bad, you may think that you're connecting to some idiot that left their thing on the internet open so that you could come connect to it. When in fact you might be connecting to someone incredibly way smarter than you that put something out there so that you would come and click on it. And this is what they call a honeypot. There's a link called honeyscore.shodan.io where it goes into explaining what a honeypot is. And if you read the book by John Matherly, he does a really good job of explaining some of the math behind how they figure out what is a honeypot and what is not, and it's pretty interesting. That's all I have. I want you to help me get better by connecting to me, letting me know how I can improve on this talk or anything else. My website's aaronblythe.com. You can connect with me on whatever, LinkedIn or whatever the links are on the website. But that's all I have for today, so thank you.